Mental Growth Network. Today we have very special podcast. This topic really interesting nowadays to many specialists in digital health. Can good design heal? UX UI influence on mental well-being. Today we have a special guest, Casey Addy. Hello, Casey.
Good day, everyone, and it's great to be here.
Casey is a user experience specialist with a deep focus on healthcare. So to start from, Casey, can you tell us what means user experience specialist? What is your background, and how is it that you come on a deep focus on healthcare?
Sure. I like to say what user experience is to those who are not in tech. I say I'm the type of person that makes your app, your website, or anything related to technology simple and easy to use. For people who are inside of the world of tech, I like to say user experience is I'm the connection between the feelings of your customer and how they will want to use your app or your idea to best have them really see the value of what you're trying to get across. I've been in the American healthcare system since I was a baby. And you might have heard through many, many different sources that the healthcare system needs fixing or needs updating. There's many flaws in it. And as somebody with a lived experience, I can tell you there are many hurdles. And that's one of the reasons why I've chosen to focus a lot of my expertise on trying to make the world a better place in the world of healthcare with technology and user experience.
Thank you.
Yep.
If we will start discovering our topic, can you tell us about the user interface? What does healing mean in the context of design? Can interfaces truly support mental well-being?
I think there is the capacity for technology to help with healing. In my opinion, there's really two types of healing. You have emotional healing, where you have experienced something, I'll say internally traumatic, or some hill in your life that you feel like is insurmountable. And there is physical healing, where you've had a broken bone or a disease or a sickness, and you need your body to physically heal from that experience. And in both of those experiences, or both of those types, I think technology can help facilitate healing in the sense of delivering you a well thought out therapeutic approach to your care. It is incumbent upon you as a person going through the healing to take this adventure in your life seriously. The interface can't do it all for you. I feel it is more of a delivery vehicle for you to be able to get to a healing path. But if you do not work at it yourself, I think technology can only get you so far in the healing process. I think there's a capacity in short, but it can't do it all. You, as a participant in healing, need to be able to do some of the work yourself.
Mhm. And can you give us some examples, for example, of interface or some logic of interface where we feel comfortable to use it and when we feel uncomfortable to use it? What is the difference?
So, comfort to me is one of the things that we need to spend time as technical folks and folks in the behavioral world of really understanding our users and figuring out what comfort means to them. Because a lot of times it's going to be contextual. So, for example, something that brings me comfort that may not bring others comfort is food and video games. If you didn't grow up like I did, for example, around a family that welcomed video games and introduced important moments of my life through food, you might find those quite uncomfortable. In the mental health world, I'd like to think that comfort is bringing elements of your care that helps put away some of the anxiety, the depression, or whatever emotional event that you're caught up in to the side for a moment and allows you to be able to focus on the task at hand or the conversation that you're having with a care professional. Anxiety and interfaces, to me, I feel ends up happening when we either ask our users to do too much at one time. So, for example, when you are upselled in like a food app, for example, or you're given like a countdown clock to do something. A lot of times, what we do in the UX world is we use the technique called FOMO, or the feeling of missing out on something, to essentially cause a little bit of emotional rub to get you to do something that a business would like you to do, which is make more money. But at the same time, for many people that I know, they don't like pressures of time, or they don't like pressures of being able to feel like they're being excluded. So I use that example as a way of it's unintentional anxiety that could happen for a lot of people. Or one other quick little example that I'm used to seeing that causes people anxiety is unpredictability in an interface. What does that mean? The classic example I like to use is in a lot of free apps that are out there, businesses use ads to be able to make money. However, the businesses who make these apps are not in control of the delivery mechanism of these apps and these ads. So sometimes the ads will just pop up in the middle of you doing something, or in some apps, there'll just be a constant banner at the bottom and it'll refresh and it'll refresh and it'll display a new ad like every 30 to 60 seconds. While that achieves a business goal of making money, that creates unpredictability that a lot of people that I've worked with in my life do not really care for. And I try to actively discourage those types of mechanisms for another way that we can be able to still meet a business objective while trying to remove that anxiety element.
Mhm. And in your experience, we were talking about this type of monetization strategy versus uncomfortable user experience. Is it really often nowadays? How do you think? Do people, I don't know, underestimate UX, or maybe they not really understand that it's so much influence our emotional in decision? Why do you think in general, is it UX is now really spread and developed, or it's only starting its way? And can you tell some more of
Mhm.
your feeling of the market in general?
Yeah. So I think part of this is it's coupled with how technology is being grown and considered at this point in time of the human experience. What do I mean by that? I mean, right now, the tech world is very, in my opinion, concerned with being able to deliver fast, deliver value, and then afterwards figure out how to improve. What tends to happen that I've seen is that things in what I call a proper UX process of being able to understand your users and do a few rounds of testing with your app or your website with your users before you launch, those tend to either get shortcut or skipped altogether. So for me, that ends up cutting out the time that we have to really understand the emotional impact of our decision making, and then have to either put some band-aids on afterwards to minimize the hurt that we have caused, or to have to rethink everything from the ground up. And being in tech for about 16 years now, one of the life lessons I've been given from people who are either smarter or have been in the business longer than myself is the notion of what you might have heard as trade-offs. Trade-offs are a decision-making pyramid, for lack of a better term, where you have to figure out what is the best in a given situation. You're not going to get everything ultimately either perfect or the way you would like it, and that either comes at the expense of time, cost, or easiness of being able to deliver something. For me, I try to look at, is there a way we could hit that pyramid of fast, cheap, and easy in some way that doesn't cause emotional harm, or at least can be able to be adapted quickly should we be able to fail fast and out of the gate. That's how I really look at the state of today's world is that we have a very product focus on being able to get new things out into the market. And the experience choices that we end up making come second just because of either a time pressure or a financial pressure to be able to deliver something.
And then what is the solution? We should more go deeply on before starting UIs kind of. Yes, we need to go deeper in UX, do some research, do some, I don't know, pre-market validation, yes, or what can be a suggestion? For example, for people who only plan to do an app, what can you suggest?
Yeah. So I think it's very important to at least try to plan out as much as you can with the foreseeable future. I mean, if you have an idea, let's say you want to build a therapy app. In my opinion, it's a good idea to get everything that you want out on like a whiteboard or your product management tool of choice. Everything that you could possibly ever want to do. The reason why I start with that is because if you have an idea of how big you want to be, you can then go, if we have to design something, whether it's from a technology perspective or from a user experience perspective, it's good to be able to know all of the things that we eventually want to be able to build so we can design a home for them to live within our app or our website without having to reinvent the wheel over and over again. So as a more concrete example, if you want to be able to deliver let's say a talk space kind of app where you are delivering therapy to people, if you have an idea that you want to be able to deliver that healing through video, through audio, through AI, through your Amazon Echo devices, or any other type of modality, it's going to be really important to decide as much of that as possible. Again, you can't always foresee 100% everything you want to do, but having enough of an idea is going to be helpful so that way, when you do decide you want to turn on all four of those, your users are not going to be given a brand new app or a brand new website that they have to learn over and over again. That's something that I feel that causes unintentional harm or unintentional stress upon our users when we don't figure out at least enough of our roadmaps as technology people that we have to brand new, scrap everything, make a brand new experience, and force our users to learn something over again. Because to them, it's just an app. To us, it's a living thing that we have to care and feed in the technology world. And for us, we're okay with scrapping over and redoing it because that's our bread and butter. For somebody who doesn't know all that inside, it's basically like learning the world all over again, and it can be very stressful to some people.
Mhm. And when you were talking about creating this features roadmap and vision, this is understandable. And what is the next step? How do you prioritize them? How to choose the right ones that you need to start from?
So first, I think prioritization starts as a conversation internally and a conversation with your users and your target audience. I think you need both. And here's why I think you need both. Internally, you need to know what is the market value of these types of features that you're about to put out there. You need to know the overall cost, and that is not just in terms of dollars, but in terms of technological costs. For example, server hosting, API licensing, third-party usage, data storage, the level of effort it's going to be to develop said solution and maintain it afterwards, the amount of effort it's going to take for you to design how a user goes through all of this. You might say it being able to text a therapist is, let's say it's $100,000, made up number there. That might be okay for some product teams and go, that's really cheap. Let's go ahead and start doing that. Like that's an important feature because we know people on their phones are good at texting and it's a comfortable mechanism for people to be able to go out there. Video chat might be rated at 1 million or 10 times the effort of doing text-based chat. That might cause some teams to go, we don't want to do video immediately. Or depending upon the market that they want to break into, if video is not even in the ballpark, that 10x investment might be the highest thing they want to do because it could be a differentiator value that puts them on the market. Without having that conversation of understanding what is the value of your features, what is the level of effort needed to make them, I think you are basically charting a blind course, potentially to failure, but for some people, that's the fun of technology is going and building and seeing if something works. On the user research side, in that same example, for some people, depending upon who your target market is, they might tell you, I don't want to be on camera. Like a camera makes me uncomfortable. I know a number of people in my own personal life that prefer to be able to talk with others either through text or through a audio device, like a phone call. That might have no business value, or you don't plan on supporting it. However, without knowing that, you can't have an informed conversation with your internal partners and with your audience around, well, if everybody says they want to do a phone call and we don't want to do it, are we okay with having to either force a potential market to adapt, or do we have to add this feature to our roadmap and go, well, we really care about this type of market or being able to cater to this alternative method of delivering our value. So what is it going to take to be able to deliver a telephonic solution? I think without this back and forth data gathering and conversation approach, you are going to be potentially set up to fail or throwing your potential success as a roll of the dice and just letting it ride. And that to me seems quite risky.
Hmm. Yes, thank you. This is interesting. Coming back to our topic of mental
Mhm.
well-being and UX, you as a UX UI specialist, if you had a chance to learn something from mental health experts, what, in your opinion, mental health specialists should teach UX UI specialists?
I think there's at least two things that I think most UX people and UI people should really know from talking to behavioral health and mental health experts. Number one is the art of conversation. What do I mean by that? I mean, we're having a conversation right now, but it's from two people who already know each other and have at least some level of rapport and respect between each of us. Having a conversation with a stranger or somebody who is very closed emotionally is very tough. You have to be patient and you have to use what I more like to call deep listening and empathetic questions to be able to inspire somebody to come out of their shell. Um, I'm not perfect at it. I won't ever claim to be, but being able to invite somebody to feel like they are in a place where they can be able to say something and not feel bad or judged or inconsiderate or any other negative emotion that we have in the world. I think that is one of the number one things that us in not only tech but in UX could be able to learn, which is learning how to be able to write in a welcoming way. And that's because I would argue, making up a number here, 80 to 90% of what our interfaces are, at least today, are built through text and conversation, because that's how we as humans interact with each other. So if your writing skills are not very good, it's okay. It's a chance for growth, and it's a chance to improve how you deliver your next interface to somebody. The other piece that I was introduced to when I worked for a wellness company was something called behavior change. Behavior change, as it's been described to me, is the art of being able to work with a person to overcome certain barriers or change habits that they have from one state to another. In the wellness world, a classic example of that is getting somebody up off of the couch and starting to exercise. Why is that a needed behavior change? Well, as most people would probably argue and know, that the human body is designed to move. It's not designed to sit for long periods of time. Being able to sit for long periods of time is tied to many major illnesses and things like obesity and not good cardiovascular health and a whole bunch of other potential negative health conditions, which I'm not a licensed medical profession to tell you, but I can infer what could happen if you sit too long. Why do we want people to get up and move? It's because we want people to be able to live longer. We want them to be able to have the ability to run, or if we know that somebody really wants to be able to, let's say, meet a major milestone in their life, like being able to see their kids get married. We can use examples of what a person's goals are to slowly inspire them to adopt a new habit. You can't just ask somebody to become a marathon runner overnight. That's something where the body is just not designed to do a 0 to 26 mile run overnight. It takes months and months of preparation. But through behavior change, you can do things like inform and inspire people to take the first step, literally and metaphorically, of getting up off of the couch. Like you set goals for them, which is maybe let's, get up a couple times a day off the couch and maybe like go to the mailbox, or be able to go to the front yard and walk around your house and be able to observe nature and enjoy it for what it is. Once people adopt this as a habit, then you can start to encourage them to take the next step further, which is, well, let's go around the block. Let's go another longer, more meaningful distance to you. And then we build upon these habits. So that way, by the time you get ready to wanting to go to that marathon, not only are you mentally in a position to be able to overcome that next hurdle, but your body is also going to be ready for it as well. Um, Personal trainers and health coaches are the prime examples of professions where they live out the behavior change principle in day to day because they have this conversation with all of their customers or mentees, which is, where do you want to go? How fast do you want to go there? More importantly, why do you want to do this? Understanding that why is the core element of behavior change that you can use to motivate and inspire people as much as possible to get to their desired outcome.
Hmm. Hmm. So behavioral change number two, and number one, welcoming friendly language. Be patient
Absolutely.
language, yes. Mhm. Yes, this is very short and I think very effective.
Can
Um,
be yes.
hmm, I want to ask your opinion on specific design approach for people with chronic stress and burnout. This type of people very often very sensitive to the kind of push-ups and different things that interface can do. Is there specific secrets about that, how to deal with this target audience?
For me, when I hear burnout and stress, um, for me, it's important first to answer your question is to really understand how burnout and stress happens. For a lot of people, um, and this is again from what I've been exposed to in my own life experience and secondary research that I've done, is there are a few different life circumstances that either people take on or they are thrown into that require them to exert more of themselves over time, and eventually their bodies just fall flat, metaphorically, on them and become burnt out. So for me, how I would start to approach either an app or a website around catering to these types of people with these needs is first really understanding the nature of this condition. How does it, you know, and how does it create it? What are the factors in somebody's life that creates this? And understanding the nature of these, for lack of better terms, symptoms of how our bodies react to stress is important because then I can understand either if there's similar patterns, similar lifestyles, or similar things that cause these things to happen. And by these things, again, I mean burnout and stress. After learning about the nature of these conditions that people have, I would then use that as an opportunity to go, as a hypothetical example here, a common thing that I have seen is executive type leaders burn out after 6 months of a new job because they're not good at delegating. They feel like they have to take everything on. And then there are other consequences of being able to hold everything and all decisions on one person. That person feels great because they're like, I'm important, but I have to do everything myself. And then over time, they have to work longer days, longer nights to be able to, unstuck the metaphorical glue that they are creating in their job by being the one gatekeeping everything. This I've seen a number of stories in my own personal life and also from friends I've seen on LinkedIn where they've just had to take like a year or two off from doing everything as a way to recover from this type of burnout. And the type of app I would make for them is a combination of teaching tutorial slash instructional game around delegating. The reason why I would make something like that is because to me, that type of person is not going to get the art of delegation of tasks just from reading an article. This is a type of principle that you have to be able to exert like a muscle and practice it over and over and over again so that way you as a person feel comfortable in releasing the things that you are used to owning to somebody else, which is a very uncomfortable feeling for high level professionals like you and I who are used to doing the individual work at such an cellular level where it's like, but if I don't do it, it's not going to get done right. Or if I don't do it, it's not going to get done at all type of feeling. While that's a good feeling that inspires you and me to move with high levels of accuracy and quality, to other people, it feels like you're not trusting them to be able to do the work. That's why I feel like either an interactive experience that teaches people how to delegate or a game that shows people the art of delegation and inspiring your team to be able to do well, for me, is a stress breaker because what you're doing is you're teaching people effectively the medicine that they need to practice to be able to undo the life learned behavior that they have accumulated over their life of I have to do everything. I have to be the one that gets it done. While that does work for a period of time, it can be one of the major emotions tied to burnout because then you have to work 12, 14, 16-hour days to make it feel like everything has gotten done. So that's like a chief example that I would use in a very specific targeted sense to help people who are facing burnout is to be able to try to teach people what to look for, the attitudes around it, and principles of teaching you how can you undo burnout through the examples of delegation.
And if we go to this idea of measuring the burnout level or stress level, chronic stress, how can we measure that? Is there any way of measuring emotional well-being or emotional state that you know that is commonly used in different apps? If we talk about
Yeah.
digital measuring.
So there are traditional ways of measuring people's emotions. You've probably seen them in like an app or a website where you get those little pop-up surveys that ask you a certain amount of questions after you've done a certain task. Those are what we like to call in the user research world uh, quantitative data measurement, where we ask you a survey with like a Likert scale of 1 to 5 of how are you feeling, were you able to feel like you got this done? And we report out on an aggregate average of how X amount of customers or X amount of users felt like using this particular service. The pro of that is that it's, you know, it's very familiar. something that we have used for years to, probe and ask people for their feedback. Um, the con of it is it's a very subjective feeling, right? So for something that for you feels hard, could be something that's easy for me because I could have done that particular task hundreds of times before, and I am sort of numb to it. What I think might be a better mechanism to measure or at least start to come up with some metrics for our emotions is looking at behavior and sentiment. One of the things that is out there right now in the social media world is called social listening and sentiment aggregation and sentiment tracking. These technologies use the value of each session and the words and the actions that you take in a particular app and website and map them to emotional and behavioral characteristics. Emotional and behavioral data in practice is a lot harder to fake than self-reported data, which was what you get off of a survey. That for me is a little bit more what I'll call impactful type of data because it's something that you can actively collect. It's more truthful than a opinion, and it's really hard to fake. Like if you're clicking around an interface 100 times to try to find something and you eventually find it, some people will still report that it was easy because they were able to get it done. You and I, as tech professionals, are going to go, well, why did they spend 100 clicks? We would never get that level of nuance about how a person is feeling solely looking at a survey data because that is self-reported data. If we looked at behavioral mapping, like for example, heat maps or those little click maps of where people are clicking, you get to see behavioral data. And that allows us to be able to see, at I feel, a much better way, what are the behaviors and the emotions that are being triggered by our interfaces, and start to ask the better questions of why are people feeling this way? And if we start to see this data happen in an aggregate, then we know we have big problems. If it's more of a 5%, 10%, that's an opportunity for discovery on that particular audience to see like, is it like the color? Is it the language? Is it because they've not been exposed to our type of communication style? Is that what's throwing them off or creating this emotion? That's how I like to approach this type of situation is that yes, you can rely upon metrics, in the traditional survey way. We just have to be aware of it's self-reported data. I personally try to always espouse, can we get to behavioral data that allows us to get an insight into emotions rather than, oh yeah, I'm good. Because people that just say they're good and they're really not, just because we don't want to upset others. Like that's just in our nature. That's why, again, I like to look at behavioral data.
Mhm. Yeah, so sounds like behavior data is much more precise and more truthful to use. When we talk about user experience and especially marketing and sales, because very often when we think about UX UI, yes, we think about marketing in general. And if we were talking about vulnerable users, how do dark patterns and manipulative UX tactics affect vulnerable users? Can you think about some of examples and
Yeah.
why is it
So
dangerous?
I think so that there's many, many stories out there about and websites dedicated to the chronicling and adopting and documenting of dark patterns. Um, for me, not only do I not like them, as a user myself, I've been subjected to them and know that it actually the dark patterns result in a well-intentioned developed poorly. So an example of that I feel is the triple or quadruple confirm that you want to leave a particular service where you are given these emotional hits along the way. Like I think one of the things I've seen, at least in previous days, when you want to leave Facebook, there is you have to press a button that says, I want to leave. You'll get a confirmation with some standard language. And if you go through that, they'll hit you again with being able to say, all of these people that you know are going to miss you, and you're going to miss out on all of these life experiences that you're going to miss. And they'll hit you one more time with a different type of "Are you sure?" Because in Facebook's eyes, you are an important part of the social network. And if we have people leave, it ruins them because they have fewer people on their platform. To me, it's a well-intentioned way of the business to try to keep their customers. I think the approach of it is wrong because to me, it feels like you're shaming people and trying to leave. And it should be, in my opinion, your choice as a user to decide what types of platforms you want to be on. So for me, like if we use that type of pattern of like the triple, quadruple type of confirmation, like in a therapy app, let's say, I think that that could do a lot of harm to people who are really needing these types of services to feel better and to be able to heal and grow as individuals. Because not only do I think we're not respecting what they want to do, but I think it will actively disincentivize them from trying to seek help if we constantly question their choices or constantly question what it is that they want to do. So to me, like again, in that therapy choice, if you want to see a different therapist and we throw up four different are you sures after it, it throws up in my mind a feeling of the therapist is using some sort of, or at least it could be perceived this way, of some sort of power over you and is trying to keep you from being able to have your own perspective around your care. And for somebody who really needs help and actively knows that this is not a good fit, that almost can feel like a prison. And I don't think technologically we should support those kinds of things, but rather we should make it more or less powers in the user's hands to figure out what it is that they want to do in their care. And if they don't know, we use our intelligence and our good sensibilities as people who want to help others to be able to say, here's a couple choices that you can do if you're not sure. You can take path A. Here's what path A will do. Here's path B. Here's what path B will do. And here's path C. Instead of giving people 100 choices where they won't know what to do, if we give people three, we reduce the paralysis choice that a lot of people have when they're not sure of what to do in important areas of their life. But we make the road back to using technology and in their care so much simpler.
Hmm. Um, if we dig about it more,
Mhm.
can you name a specific ethical line between persuasive design and emotional manipulation?
This is a good one because, in my experience, you can use persuasive techniques as part of behavior change. So, for example, in that marathon example I was mentioning earlier, using somebody's goal of being able to either get to the finish line or be able to be healthy to see their kids get married, I think is an okay and an acceptable use of persuasion because we are using a person's goals as a reminder of the power within themselves. Emotional manipulation to me is being able to reframe that person's goal in a completely negative context. So, manipulation for me comes to shaming a person for not meeting their goal. So, for example, if you ask somebody, do you want to be able to, become obese, or do you never want to be able to see your kids get married? Those are examples of shameful techniques that I think start to go down the road of emotional manipulation because what you're doing, in my opinion, is turning a person's goal upside down and making it shame for even thinking of it in the first place. Rather, in my opinion, like whether it's through human curation of this language or if it's AI generation of this language, as long as we honor what a person's goals are and talk to them in a positive light, I think persuasive design can still have a place in the world of healthcare because what we're reminding people of is that you have the power as a person to achieve any goal that you want. Manipulation, in my opinion, is turning somebody's goals on their head to either shame them or get them to do something that you want them to do. So, for example, if that marathon app was actually built by a corporation and said, if you, for example, if you don't buy our shoes, you will never become a marathon runner. And if really behind the scenes, the goal of that app is just to sell more shoes, that to me is more of an example of emotional manipulation of being able to shame somebody in not meeting their goal because they didn't do the task you wanted them to do, which was open up their wallet and buy your fancy $100 shoes.
It was deep.
Thank you. Yes.
Um, Talking about UI interfaces, because our audience, some of them are not really experienced at all. It can be our healthcare professional who really never did an app and he will be interested even in basic things. So can you tell us a bit of a visual element? What visual elements, example like color, spacing, motion, tend to smooth or to overstimulate mind?
On the comforting front, I'll talk about comfort. A lot of times what I've seen, at least in modern day technology design, is two main patterns of color palettes. You have what I'll call the medical blues, and you have the earth tones. The medical blues are used with shades of blues, whites, and grays because it's a very medical context. And it's also a very trust-inspiring context. That's part of the reason why you see a lot of software brands use blue in their color palettes. It's because they want you to trust them. And blue in color psychology is a very trustworthy color. It builds trust, it builds respect. That's a big reason why the medical industry uses it. Um, the earth tones are used in a lot of the coaching or the emotional healing types of aspects where the emphasis is not on the colors per se, it's rather the video or the text or the images that come through the interface. So they don't want you to spend a lot of time looking at the colors. They want you to spend time looking at the other things in the interface. I think both have a place. For me, it's all about when you are setting up your app, you ask yourself, what balance of trust and what I'll call noise, to get to your noise piece in just a second, do I want people to feel? Am I a medical company or am I doing some sort of very obvious medical service? I would argue you start to go down the blue road where you use all of the similar expectations that people have with the medical world and other types of software that you start to build trust and respect with. If you're more working on the emotional side, or if you are delivering the intangible service of coaching, healing, that's where I think more of the earthy tones start to work because the focus is more on how you feel and what is delivered through your service, not the actual colors themselves. Where I tend to see distractions start to get involved is lots of animation. In my own personal style, I don't use animation that much in my work, partially because one, it can be distracting. Two, a lot of times it actually slows down users from actively taking part in what you want them to do. And number three, I feel is that for people with some level of disabilities, primarily in the vestibular world, or people who get like motion sickness, you actually can cause harm by having lots of animation in your interface. So I start with no animation, and if there are some storytelling elements that can help the delivery of an important message, that's when I add animation with the ability to turn it off so that way users who don't like it or have some sort of level of disability related to animation, they can be able to turn it off. Some other things that I see that are really helpful is the notion of clean, lots of white space, and well-lit photography that shows a lot of emotion and warmth. Because what I like to give to users going through these types of apps and websites is not just the stereotypical, you're going to have a smile using our app, but rather I want to imply that the people who have gone through this before have felt some value of using this service or have felt some level of relief using this. And dark lit, generic type of stock photography doesn't show that. Having well lit, having people active with smiles who are doing the results of the service that you are doing, I think really helps. And in the event that there's going to be the time where a image can't work, or you're trying to convey something so special that an image just can't do, that's where I feel a good illustration, and you see that in a lot of medical apps these days, is you see more usage of illustration rather than photos. And that's because they are relying upon using the power of a drawing to be able to imply the results of their service, and also adding a little bit of a smile and a little bit of a graphical touch to a potentially really, really hard to convey emotion. Um, so in summary, white space, good colors help. Lean less on animation and stock photography, and do your best to be able to really focus all of the visual elements on supporting people along the way.
Thank you. Last question, a little bit futuristic. Interesting about the future. If we will give our imagination to fly, and you can imagine design can be different, maybe in some unexpected way than now. What would the future look like where design is treated as a mental health intervention?
I think if we treat design like therapy, let's say, intervention, I think the world can benefit. But I think in order for this to happen, a couple of pre-work steps need to happen. One is it's incumbent upon designers to be able to explain their craft, because a lot of people that I've worked with still really don't know what design is. It's incumbent upon us to be able to show what the power of design is, the thinking of design, and show through some of those examples I've mentioned here today is design can create the space for therapy to start. If we don't give the space, and by space I mean time and budget and the ability to have a conversation like what we're having here today, I don't think we can have the space to create interventions for people, whether it's the physical world, the emotional world, the spiritual world, or anywhere there in between. Assuming that happens, I think being able to have interventions linked to not only positive health outcomes, but because I live in the States, I also have to add tied to important financial outcomes for people and for businesses. Then design can come first. Because, at least here in the States, almost every app and website I've worked on has always had a financial motivation in the background. So when we can be able to create the space for everybody to be successful with the world of design, then we make it a lot easier for people to not feel shamed to come forward and be able to say, I need help, to not feel like what's bugging them is a problem or something that they need to be hiding around. I see a world in which our phone, our Amazon Echo, our Siris, our Google Assistants, are tools that allow us to connect better to the people inside of ourselves and the people who we rely upon to help us move forward in our lives. That to me is the ultimate goal that I aspire to, is that using technology as a way to have people become more open with themselves and connecting them to services and the people and the things that they really need to understand about themselves. That's where I think real progress can come. I don't think, let me put it this way, if it's just building another version of, let's say, Chat GPT to be able to ask you questions and become like a digital therapist, I don't see that as the perfect outcome because it was a solution derived solely out of technology in and of itself. But if we said, we really have these three types of diseases that can really be started to be solved by having somebody who is available to you, who can ask you questions, inspire you. And it's whether it's a real human or a bot, that I think is a really cool use of technology because we're building it towards a goal. We're building it towards the betterment of humanity and not just building it just for the sake of building a new shiny toy. That for me is how I see the world of design creating real interventions for people is that we start with caring for people. We understand the mental and physical health gaps that are out there. And then let's start looking at what are the tools in our toolbox to get you there. Before we go, we need to create a new tool to solve this.
Thank you so much. It was
No problem.
a deep dive in design in healthcare apps. And thank you, Casey.
No problem.
It was Casey Addy, a specialist in UX UI with a focus on healthcare. And it was our podcast for Mental Growth Network. Please like, subscribe, ask any comments. We can transfer them to Casey and see you soon in our new podcast. Bye bye.
All right. Bye bye.